Hello, everyone, and welcome to the House of Peregrine podcast. Today, I'm excited to be welcoming Sam Frearson-Tubito, a global nomad and memoirist who has written Beneath a Borrowed Sky, a memoir of her life as a global nomad and mother of 4 children. Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I am really excited to talk to you. I hunted you down on Instagram, and I really wanted to have a conversation with you. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Mikkel. It's great to be here.
Thanks. So when you and I just wanted you to start by introducing yourself. And you have an actually really incredible life because you have been a global nomad your entire life, from when you were a child on up. And now you're writing about that in your book. But I want to start people back with how you grew up. So can you maybe just tell us about that, your growing up as a global nomad?
Yeah, of course. So I don't know whether you're familiar with the terminology third culture kid.
I am, but please explain to our listeners.
Yeah, so a third culture kid is a kid who's been raised in a culture other than their parents' culture, and who has lived in a country other than their nationality, or more than a few countries actually, and has lived in different environments during a significant part of their childhood and their childhood development years. So I was born in West Indies, in St. Kitts and Nevis, a tiny little island in the Caribbean. I was there for a couple of years, then we moved to Bordeaux in France. Should I just go through the list of where I've lived?
Yeah, you might as well. Yeah, you've lived a lot of places, so just list them off for us so paint us a picture.
Yeah, then we went to Zaire, so it's actually the Republic of Congo. We lived in Kinshasa, the capital, and then we actually moved to Lubumbashi. So we were there for quite a few years, about 4 or 5 years, I think. And then that's when my parents decided to send me to boarding school. Actually, sorry, we then moved to Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast in West Africa. And then, so I went to local school there, so French-speaking school. And my parents were like, oh, what are we doing? We're kind of raising this child. She's becoming a bit wild. She's speaking better French than English. This will not do. I probably should say that my dad, the reason for all these moves was because my dad was an international banker. He worked for Barclays Bank, and we would move every 2 to 3 years to different postings. And anyway, so that's when my parents decided that they wanted to send me to boarding school. My mom is Catholic. She's from Gibraltar, which I don't know if you guys know where that is. It's right at the tip of Spain. And it's actually a British territory, but it's its own little country in itself, like Malta. And so she's from there, very, very Catholic upbringing, and she was kind of worried about the whole Catholic thing, and she wasn't able to sort of bring me up properly in that way. So yeah, boarding school came along, and so I was sent to the UK, hence my British accent. And every 3 months, I would just go back and forth to wherever my parents were, or wherever home was, because home was always wherever my parents were. It was never in boarding school, because the UK for me has always been, that's where I was institutionalized, I would say. I mean, boarding school, I was okay. I had fun, but, it wasn't home. So I would go back and forth. So after the Ivory Coast, we then moved to Hong Kong. We were there for 1.5 years. And then after that, we went to Lusaka in Zambia. And then we went to, I feel like I'm missing a couple of things. Anyway, oh yeah. And then after that, we went to Egypt. So I think that's 8 countries in total.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all of that, so I think when I was 6 or 7, we went to the UK for 1 year, just in between postings. I think it was after the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So yeah, so that's where I've lived up until the age of 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there's people who consider, third culture kids is something people use a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, the culture of your family, the third culture was moving. Like, it was planned moving. That was a choice that your parents made for a job. And so how did that manifest in your family? Was it just kind of like, where are we going next? Or was it exciting? Or you didn't know anything different, I would assume?
Yeah, well, I'll always remember that exciting feeling every time my dad would come home from the office and say, hey guys, guess where we're going next? And we were like, oh my God, where are we going? Where are we going? So it was always very exciting up to a certain point. So in my teenage years, that was a lot more difficult to be happy, to be excited about, because of course I'd be making friends wherever we were living. I remember when we were living in Lusaka, I made a really good bunch of friends. I mean, we had so much fun there, and I was devastated. I was devastated to be moving away from there because, yeah, I was a teenager. I was 16 years of age, and I was like, no, don't take me away from this place. This is my home.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a mix of excitement, a mix of, I hate moving, but that was more of a teenage thing.
Yeah.
And also a lot of confusion. And that's what happens with a lot of third culture kids, because you're basically moved from one country to another. A lack of identity. Yes, I sound very British, but I don't feel British in any way whatsoever, because I'm 53 years of age and I've lived 3 years in the UK.
Wow.
I'm not including the boarding school time, because it wasn't home for me. It was just, I would literally go from the airport straight to school, spend 3 months there, and then I get back in the bus, go back to the airport and go home.
Yeah. And do you think that was your parents' attempt at making you British? Like, oh, she doesn't have enough British. Because they're
Yeah.
British. Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad is British. Actually, fun fact, my dad is also a third culture kid, and my grandmother is a third culture kid.
Wow.
So I'm actually third generation third culture kid, and my kids, who we'll talk about later, are fourth generation third culture kids. So it runs in the family. My mum, she wasn't a third culture kid, so yeah, it was different for her. But my dad, it was just like, yeah, okay, yeah, just go to boarding school, then you come back, and it was just like,
this is what
the
we
thing
do.
that we did. Yeah.
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 Yeah. That makes so much sense, because whatever you grow up with is just normal, right? And that you either want to do that or you don't when you move on. So I find it really interesting that you have lived in more countries than some people have actually traveled to, but all of them I've never traveled to. They're not normal traveling to countries. And so I think that your upbringing was different in that way. Were there a lot of people, internationals, where you were, or were you more kind of the outlier?
No, there were a lot. It was at the time where, yeah, there were a lot of international companies sending their expats to these places.
I see.
And yeah, we were kind of surrounded by an international community. Absolutely.
Nice. And so everyone was kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, and the majority, because we were expats with Barclays Bank, a lot of the people that we hung out with were British expats and French expats that would send their children to boarding school. So I wasn't the only one that was being sent off.
Yeah.
So
okay.
what we would do is we would find each other again back at home during the holiday time. That was fun.
Nice. And that is kind of your culture in a way, is that those people wherever you would go with the company. And
Yeah.
how was that for you? Did you find that, I mean, when you look back, not a lot of people grew up that way, but it's the only thing you knew. So you were just adapting. Was that what you would say? Or you were just doing what your parents?
I think, yeah, you just adapt. I mean, so until the age of me being sent to boarding school, I was just doing whatever my parents were doing. We were moving around as a family. And then when I was sent to boarding school, then I kind of I created these two different personas. The one that was in the UK in boarding school, and the one that was home in whatever country we were living in at the time. So it became, yeah, again, that's how I grew up. So it was just the way it was.
Yeah.
I did, because obviously, during boarding school time, you have a lot more freedom. I mean, everyone thinks, oh my gosh, it must have been so strict and everything, but you're kind of left to your own devices a lot of the time, because you're just living in an institution, you're living with a bunch of other kids the same age, it's fun, you do whatever you want to do, kind of, to a certain extent. But then when you go back home, there are rules that you have to follow. Even difficult rules. I mean, my parents were quite strict. They're just very traditional parents of that age, of that time. And, children should be seen and not heard kind of thing. And it was difficult. The whole sort of, changing. Okay, I can be really free away, but when I come home, which is where I really should be myself, I need to actually be careful with what I do and with what I say, and I can't really be me. It was a challenging time, but at the same, again, it was the way it was. But that is the reason why when we decided, as in my husband and I decided to do this expat life as well and have children along the way as well, we decided to do it very differently.
Yeah. So tell me
But we
about
can
that.
talk about that later.
Yeah. So tell me, I really want to understand. So I'm asking for myself too, because our kids, like all of us who listen to this, and if we have kids, we're all wondering, how can we do it differently? How can we make it more on the positive end than the negative end? You can't get rid of all the negatives of being from a different culture and learning how to code switch. There's positive and negatives to all of these things that our kids, these skills that our kids end up learning as a result of being from a different culture. But it's very rarely you get to talk to someone who has done it and then had such a generational way of, like, part of their family. So I really love that. And so were there any, last question I want to have for you is, like, did your dad have any things that you passed on, like, from that culture that were like things you did as an international person who, or a nomadic person who, that made it so you knew that was part of your heritage?
Do you know, yeah, I get asked this question a lot. I think he didn't really pass anything on. It was just the way it was.
Mm.
The fact that he grew up that way too. I mean, he was born in South Africa. He lived in Canada. He lived in New Zealand. His dad was a Royal Air Force pilot. And it was just like, yeah, you just get on with it. Very British, stiff upper lip, just get on with it. And, you're not allowed to complain about missing family or missing, I want to come home. But I guess it was the resilience. He's passing on the resilience to just keep going. You've got this. No matter what challenge is brought to you, you can deal with it.
Yeah,
Which is
and
a really great thing to
yeah,
have.
it is great. Everything with the positive has a negative, right? So if it's a positive, it comes with hard things. And this is what we talk about with our own kids and on this podcast all the time, is you have to know that what you're doing has an impact, and it's both going to be negative and positive. And everything in life is that way. But,
Absolutely.
so when it came time, you met your now husband of many years, and surprise, surprise, he also wanted to live this life. Tell us that story.
Well, yeah, so we met in London. And the few years that I was living in London was when I met my Italian husband from the south of Italy, in Puglia. And, he had a very different background to me. He was born and bred in Puglia, in Bari, in Puglia, until he moved to the UK. So he was 23 when he moved to the UK. So he had 23 years, the normal thing of just living in the town where he was born, the town where his parents were born. And so he was very, very Italian. He was embodying that Southern Italian persona. That was him. So I was really attracted to that because, at the age of 22, I was kind of lost. I was now living in London. Everyone just presumed that I was born, had spent most of my life in the UK because of my accent, which I hadn't at all. And I just really felt like a fish out of water. I don't know. He and I got together, and I actually he told me, he was like, I'm really done with living in London. I'd love to go and do something else. I'd love to, travel. I said, okay, I'm up for that because that was familiar to me. I was so
You're like, let's
yeah,
go.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we ended up actually moving to Italy, which kind of worried me a little. It excited me because I was leaving the UK and I was going to be doing something else. But at the same time, we were moving back to his country. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll do this, but I don't want to be there forever. So anyway, 2 years later, he got a job with Nike and we were sent to Bologna, which, so my eldest son was born in Milan. That's where we moved to Milan first. We were both working in advertising agencies, different ones in Milan. And then I got pregnant. I had Alessandro. And then we got moved down to Bologna. I was kind of feeling the same sort of vibe as my childhood vibe, and I was getting excited because of the moving. But, still it was like, oh, are we going to be here forever? Blah, blah, blah. And then we got asked to move to Holland. And I was like, okay, yeah, This is good. So we said yes to Holland, and we were in Holland for 8.5 years, and I got serious itchy feet for the whole 8.5 years that we were there, to be honest. And it's the typical thing that happens, when you're kind of feeling settled and you're like, you know what, I'm accepting that we're going to be in Holland for the rest of our lives.
Yep.
By the way, I'd had two more kids by then. Nicholas and Sophia were born in Holland. Of course, we were like, okay, yeah, we'll become locals here. We'll learn the language and everything. And we were asked to move to Tokyo. So yeah, it was exciting, and we moved, and it was amazing. That really reminded me of my childhood, and I was in my element because, again, I was in the international community. But the difference is that we did not send our children to boarding school. The kids remained with us. They stayed with us. I wanted them to, even though we were moving them from one place to another, and we were uprooting them from one place to another, they were with us the whole time. And that was their identity, was our family.
Yeah.
The six of us together.
Tell me about those discussions. Like, I think you and your partner probably, because you were both working, obviously you were traveling before you had kids, or you were moving to different countries. The decision, tell me about that decision, because I think you made it pretty stark decision.
Yeah. So, okay, the first decision was, what about my career? Because I was working, I was in advertising, and it became pretty obvious that Paolo's career was sort of, moving forward quite quickly, and he was doing well. And we were just like, okay, and we were having children at the time as well. And it just made sense that he would, hold the fort in terms of the money making, and I would hold the fort in terms of everything else. So that was the first decision that we made. And we were very happy with that. I was very happy with that because I wanted to make sure that even though we were going to be moving around, I wanted to make sure that the kids had one parent at home. They had that one focus at home that was with them all the time. And because my husband also traveled a lot with his job. So yeah, and it worked really, really well.
And that conversation is something that a lot of people maybe don't have. But I think when you're moving around or maybe not, maybe it's different. For me, it feels like that's the model that has to be, or else you have to have nannies, like you have to have a lot more support. How did you see it play out in other families around you as a child or as an adult? That's like the expat model, like the old school.
Yeah, the expat model.
Yeah.
I mean, I think families who move around as much as Paolo and I did with kids tend to choose that one parent needs to be at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because of stability. There are some parents that both work, that both travel, then they tend to have, a nanny that comes along with them just to create that stability. It's all about creating a stability for the kids. And because I had a very different upbringing, I was sent to boarding schools, I was sent away.
Yeah. And that sounds like a pivotal moment for you. Like it was like, that was not moving.
Yeah, I didn't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
I did not want that for my kids because, I understand why my parents did it. They did it, 40 years ago, 40 odd years ago. Back then, the international schools weren't as great as they are now. I lived in very, very different countries compared to the countries that my husband and I have been sent to. So, we were living in very Western countries, easy countries to find a good international school and a good community. Well, this is very, very different for my parents. I completely understand why they did it. But I knew that I didn't want the same thing for my kids, and I wanted them to be with us. So
that makes
100% happy about that decision.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's one that's a little bit more. So this is my what I've seen, and you can tell me if you think it's different. Companies have planned on that. They planned on that one person staying at home, one person, if that employee had kids or family. And so that becomes part of the company in a way, like your friends, your social, And that's changed quite a bit over the years. Not only are companies unwilling to pay as much for people to move. Also, it's easier to work remotely, all this stuff. But people actually want this life. They aspire to it instead of it being a hardship or something, or you have to live in these countries, so we're going to, And so I see that changing, but the recognition of the job that you did for the company, if you will, is not recognized. And so that's becoming a problem in a place in the world where actually households take two incomes. And so,
yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, really difficult nowadays for families to make that decision, especially when both partners are working and, and like the partner who's maybe earning less money or whatever is earning the same amount of money, they're not willing to give that up. Then it becomes so much harder to make these moves. And no, and Paolo and I, we made that decision together. And he is very thankful and grateful and understands what I gave up.
yeah,
I mean,
that's the key, isn't it? That's the key right there.
It is the key. Yeah, exactly. He understands and he appreciates, and actually now he's giving back to that now, because now I'm spending so much time with my book, and I'm now going to be doing a world tour with the book and everything. And he's totally 100% in, because finally I'm getting to do something for me, rather than, I mean, of course, we're bringing up children together. I love my kids. I had a wonderful time spending time with them, moving from one place to another. It was great. It was very enriching. But it was all about them. I didn't have time for me. I mean, this is so typical of a mother and a woman, and particularly for families who do decide to go on this expat ride, going from one country to another. It tends to be the woman who forgoes their career to be the family carer, the carer for the kids. But I did it willingly, full-heartedly, very happy to do it, because I wanted to see if I could really help the kids, make sure that they, have this amazingly culturally diverse upbringing, but at the same time have a very, very close-knit family, and this, have this very strong identity about family.
Yeah. That was like your thesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And what I'd like to highlight is that I love how intentional you were. I love how much your partner appreciates, your husband appreciates what you've done. And that I see is the key to this. And I've spoken also on this podcast with lawyers who handle international divorces and all these things about the agreements you should be making about this, because oftentimes if you are the person who doesn't have this agreement like you did, or doesn't do it as willingly or with as much knowledge or appreciation, that can get really ugly financially for you or the person who has been doing that work. And so I love how intentional you were. And again, that recognition back from your partner that you were giving to them and you were both giving to your family. And this is a conversation that's really fraught always. So when you say I was doing something, now I'm doing something for me, that's super important, because you were wanting to do what you were doing. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you so much, because this is often missed in women's lives, I think, is you are doing something that you want to do desperately, and you're there and you're in it. You're raising the kids. You're doing all the stuff for the house happily, willingly, totally in it. But it wasn't for you. And your partner was doing something for him, but also for your family, right? He was taking care of the financial stuff, but his career doesn't transfer to you.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes his career wherever he goes and his success there. But that's what we mean when we say we're doing something for us now, right? For us now. And it's so fraught in many circles. Well, oh, don't you love your children? Oh, you got to be a mom. Oh, you're so lucky. You don't have to worry about money. And it's like, yes, that is so true. But there's this other part that is super important, and it must be acknowledged. And that I think is so lovely. It must be acknowledged in the household and within your partnership.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, don't get me wrong. I mean, we're like any other couple, we had our ups and downs, and with every single move, anyone who's listening to this, who has made an international move with kids, knows how stressful it is. and that really takes a toll on the family and a toll on the couple's
Yep.
relationship. But the important thing, in my experience, is to talk about these things. And I do feel incredibly lucky that I was brought up in the way that I was, so I can actually bring that into our relationship, my relationship with Paolo, and make him understand that no, this, okay, yeah, you can go off for 2 weeks, but you've got to come back. You've got to be with us for a little while. You've got to be with your kids. You need to want to do that. Of course, he does.
Yeah. But you're giving him the perspective, and he's listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel very, very lucky to have been brought up in that way in order to bring something really, really good and important and supportive into our relationship and our family.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so if we can pause here before we move into the next part, is there any advice you'd give people with this knowledge? Like, your thesis was you wanted to make this culture for your kids. And what are some of the tips to do that if you're moving around?
So, yeah, if you're moving around, so basically do your homework in terms of when you're moving from one place to another, really read up about where you're going, learn some, 10 sentences of the new language if there's a new language involved with your kids. Make it a fun thing. That's what we did when we moved to Tokyo. I was lucky enough to have a Japanese friend, and I asked her, hey, can you give us some lessons because it's so important to be able to communicate in the new place, in new language. When you've moved to this foreign country where you don't understand anything, but if you have the tools, if you have the ability to say something, it empowers you so much. And if you can empower your kids, no matter how young they are, I mean, my youngest was 4 when we moved to Tokyo, and she could say 10 sentences. It was amazing listening to her in Japanese. So yeah, do your homework in terms of culture. I mean, a lot of these companies that send you will help you with this, but we didn't have that. We just did it ourselves. And again, I was lucky because of the way I was brought up that I knew that this was important. So yeah, learn about the culture, learn 10 sentences before you arrive, so you're there. And then also have goodbye parties. Really important to have a goodbye party before you leave the place with your kid, each, because I have 4 kids. So we had 4 goodbye parties. We didn't just have one goodbye party. It was one, each of the kids had their own goodbye party because it helps them grieve there and then create space for new friendships in the new place. What else? Yeah, just a lot of conversation.
You had some tips for your partner. He didn't have to. You wanted to have that culture where he was gone for a while, but then he would schedule time to be connected again to the family. With a busy travel schedule and a family, that was probably really important that you guys had agreements that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that we do spend quality time together as a family, but also individually, with each child. I mean, that's not easy when you have 4, but it's super important. Even if it's half an hour. It doesn't have to be a whole day. It doesn't have to be a weekend. It doesn't have to be a week, whatever. Half an hour, 20 minutes, one-on-one. Super important.
My partner traveled a lot, and when our kids were tiny, and after a while, I brought it to his attention that he needed to have a first-class ticket on the way back so that he was ready when the kids got home, because they were all toddlers. And so when he got home, I needed to sleep. And then, so he needed to be ready to be on. And so that was part of our agreement, was he had a first-class ticket so he could sleep on the way back.
Yeah. That's a great one.
And it seems extravagant, but it made everything possible. Well, maybe it seems extravagant to us at the time, but now I see it as like barely helping. And so I think it's really helpful for people to ask for these things, especially since companies are not actually providing as much support anymore. And people are often doing this on their own. So this structure and this wisdom you have, I think, is so helpful. And so when you made this decision to do this, it sounds like it paid off. Tell us about, what I want to know about is, did the age of your kids change how you experienced each place as a mother and as the family? Because I can imagine like you were learning different kinds of sentences in Japanese than you were in other languages. When we first moved here, we taught our kids the word sinosapalsap, which, is orange. And so that was the first word they learned in our kitchen when they were like 18 months, 3 and 4.
Yeah, amazing.
So I learned very elementary school Dutch. That was my first.
Yeah.
I speak like a child because I had children that age when I moved here. And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wonder
yeah.
if how did that work for you going to different countries?
So actually, interestingly enough, so when we moved from Tokyo, we went to the States. So obviously we all spoke English, so we didn't have to learn English. And this is when I really do say it's so important to do your homework no matter where you move to.
Yeah.
Even if you think you know the culture. I did not do my homework when we moved to the US. We didn't do it because I thought I knew it, with all the TV and, films, whatever, and I knew the language. And wow, did we get a massive culture shock. It was incredible.
What was your biggest surprise? Or several of them?
Yeah, there were a few.
You're not going to offend me. I'm American, but I've lived here 8 years, so I get it.
Well, I guess, so we were in Portland, Oregon. So West Coast, kind of new-ish, very new worldy. A lot of street malls, everything. You cannot walk anywhere unless you live in the center of Portland, which, my kids were the ages of, 8, 10, 12, and 14 when we moved to the US. There were no schools within walking distance in the center of Portland. So, yeah, that wasn't an option. Driving everywhere. A lot of people, also my accent, all the Americans love my accent. So every time I spoke anywhere, everyone would constantly try and imitate me. And it was cute initially, but after a while it was like, okay, no, this is enough. And yeah, there are so many.
How did driving everywhere affect you? What
I
did you
actually
notice?
hated it. I
Yeah.
hated it so much. Yeah, it was awful. I was not prepared for that. Having 4 kids, those ages, they were all very sporty. So, after
It's a
school
lot of driving.
activities, it was a lot of driving. I think, most days I would be in the car for 8 hours a day.
Yeah. I remember that moment. That's a moment we decided to move. I tell the story often where it's like I was sitting in my car realizing I was going to be in this car, this minivan, for the next 18 years, 8 hours a day, because I had 3 kids. And that was going to be my full-time job. There was going to be no time for anything else.
Oh yeah, and that was the other thing, was that I was working in Tokyo when we moved. I was actually the admissions director for an international school, and I absolutely loved my job. And I really wanted to do something like that when I moved to the US, but I didn't have time. There's no way. I had no time. I had no time for that. So
Yeah.
that was another, oh my God, what am I
Yeah.
going to do? And I remember, and I forget, this is not my finest moment as a mother. I picked my kids up from school one afternoon, and they're like, jumping in the back and super excited. Hey, mommy, can I go for a play date? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can we do it? But she said, okay, first, can you all just stop talking? What we're going to do now is we're going to go right straight back home, and I am not getting in the damn car again until tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Until tomorrow morning. And they were so disappointed and so upset. I said, no, sorry, no, I can't do it. I cannot do it. I felt really bad.
Yeah.
Kind of. Not really. No
but
play dates.
Yeah, no play dates, because then you have to go to and from and da-da-da. Yeah. And as a mom, like I've seen that massive difference as a mother, how you're treated in different places, how things are set up for you or not. I mean, obviously the Netherlands is an amazing place to be a mom. That's why we live here. I noticed the difference immediately in how the system works, how the city's set up, where kids are welcome. I'm very passionate about this subject actually, because when I had kids, my life immediately changed. I also worked in advertising, and basically I got fired. They're like, "Oh, you're pregnant. Great. Bye." This is before Me Too, right? They're like, "Oh, great. You're going to not have time for this job." They just like showed me the door. I was like,
wow, incredible.
Yeah, but we all know it. Now I know it happened all the time, but at the time I was just shocked. So my journey has been very much that, but I cannot be a mom in the US. Like I am American, but I would never want to be a mother there simply because I've been shown another way. It's so hard there in a lot of ways. I love where I'm from. I love my family and everything. But like for this part of my life with little kids, I feel so spoiled to have lived here and taken my bike everywhere and not, everything.
And you can have a life as well as having your children. It's not just about everything to do with the kids. Really funny story here. I don't know if this has ever happened to you before, but one of the first things that happened to me when we were in the US was Francesca, my number two. She wanted to play volleyball. Yeah, volleyball. And first of all, the first match was on a Friday evening. Okay. And I'm like, okay, that's weird, but okay, we're going to do this. So it's in the back of nowhere, back of beyond somewhere, and I get lost and we're late and, typical thing when you first move to a new country. And we go into the gym and, the team's getting all prepared. Oh, Francesca, quick. So she goes off with her team and I go onto the bleachers and I see these parents and they're sitting and quite a few of them have got these trays on their lap. And I was like, oh, what's this? And it's our dinner. We're going to have dinner in front of in front of the game. I was like, oh my goodness. And I couldn't help myself. I was like, God, what on earth possesses these people to arrange these games on a Friday evening? I'd so much rather be out with my husband, having a glass of wine, at dinner with some friends. And they looked at me horrified, as if I was like the worst mother in the world. How can you not appreciate this moment? Oh no, we love this. I was like, okay, that was a culture shock moment.
Yeah.
I know I'm not a bad mom, but this is not my idea of fun on a Friday night.
Yeah. Love equals sacrifice. Love for your children equals sacrifice.
Yeah.
Ultimate sacrifice. Yeah. And for me, it took me a long time to realize that wasn't selfish, that was actually life-giving. And that's how I could best give life, was to be alive myself. And so I think that's a lot easier to do depending on which country you're in.
Yeah. It's a very European thing, to just, go and have some fun with your friends and with your husband and go out. And yeah, the kids are going to be fine.
Yeah.
You've dedicated X amount of hours to your children.
Yeah.
Now it's your turn.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Yeah, it is normal. And actually, it was so foreign when I first arrived. It was insane. And so is it that way also in Tokyo? How did you experience being a mother in Tokyo?
So it was different because we were very much in the international community.
Yeah. Because, were you right in Tokyo? You told me where you were, but tell me again.
Yeah, we were right in the center of Tokyo. We were in Motozabu, which is, do you know Tokyo?
I've been a few times, but not well.
Yeah, so very close to Roppongi.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I've been to Roppongi. I got
Yeah,
lost there and used all the Japanese I have.
Within walking distance of Roppongi. So yeah,
nice.
super right bang in the middle. So yeah, we weren't really part of the Japanese community there. So although, because I worked there, the whole team that I worked with in this international school was actually a Japanese team, which was wonderful. So I really got I sort of, was allowed in a little bit into the Japanese. And my husband, his entire team was Japanese. So that was great. We had some fun stories to tell each other when we came back from work. But the reason why I was able to work was because I had a full-time nanny. And that was actually provided by the company. So I was very, very lucky.
Yeah.
And it felt really, really good because it was a part-time job. It wasn't a full-time job, to just spend 16 hours a week doing something for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like the change from Holland to Tokyo would be a big one. That would be a big one.
It was. Yeah. It was huge.
It's when my kids want us to go to Tokyo, so that's why I'm so interested.
I mean, Japan, Tokyo is amazing. I really recommend it. It's there's such an amazing culture. Beautiful people, such an interesting culture. The language is amazing. There's so much history. It's an incredible place. I recommend it.
Amazing. So Holland to Japan to the United States, like that's a lot. And then where did you guys go? I mean, it's not a lot, but if you hear that, and that's the life of your kids, that's a lot of cultures they were going in and out of. Do they have a favorite place that they've lived?
Japan.
Oh yeah. That's really nice.
It was a good place. And we did a lot of traveling, and they actually went to an amazing school, Tokyo International School, which was fabulous, and we met some really good people there. So it was definitely.
And as a family, did that change when you had a nanny? I mean, that's normal for most people I know to have a nanny because they don't have family around. But for your family, that was new.
It was. It took a while for the kids to get used to it.
Yeah, of course.
My daughter my youngest at the time, she had a few meltdowns. And the good thing was that I was actually working at the school that they were at.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, so you went to school with
So
them.
yes, so
Nice.
we would go to school together. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. But they didn't like the fact that I wasn't home when
When they got home.
they got home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to do a few little changes with my job and stuff. And not that I would immediately change, but, just sort of balancing all these balls, just trying to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you as a family. But yeah, it was good. And actually, it was actually really important for the kids to see me in my element as well, where I was working, and see me as something other than just mum.
Yeah. And that's so important. It's so important, but I think it's such a fraught thing. And so the clarity of the choices you guys made inspires me, because I think, at least in my circles, people are really fighting for this balance because being a stay-at-home parent isn't safe. It isn't possible. It's almost a luxury or something to be looked down on. Like it's very fraught, I would say, to be a stay-at-home parent in my circles. And I spent 8
No, I
years
understand that.
as a stay-at-home parent, and it's super interesting. But the amount of work my partner and I have done to come to this new balance is insane. To have that clarity from the beginning I can't imagine the amount of energy that we could have saved by having that clarity.
Mm.
And so I love how methodical you've been about this. And so when you decided to go back to work, was that a decision you took together? Was it just like, okay, I'm going to work now in Tokyo because we have a nanny? This is
We
like
got the
very
nanny
foreign
off.
stuff. Like this,
Yeah.
right?
We got the nanny after I decided to go back to work. It wasn't a decision. It was kind of like it was very organic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was volunteering at the school. I was very much involved, doing part of the PTA, blah, blah, blah. So I knew a lot of I knew the head of the school, and he approached me. They were looking for an admissions director, and he approached me.
Yeah. Perfect.
And yeah, I spoke to Paolo about it. I said, I think I'd really like to do this. And what do you think? And yeah, it was just, well, let's get some help in. And yeah.
Yeah,
As I
perfect.
said, it was very organic, and it wasn't like, oh my God, I really need to work. It was, I really want to work. And of course, I've always wanted to work, but at the same time, I knew that it wasn't possible. And we'd made that decision initially, right at the beginning.
That's so much
that
peace.
I wasn't. Yeah.
Like your story is so peaceful. And I know there's ups and downs. Like I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But the peace that comes from this clarity is really beautiful. So then did your kids go to any local schools, or did they mostly stay in the international?
They went to local primary school in Holland.
Oh yeah, nice. Okay.
And then not primary school, kindergarten. So they did kindergarten in Holland and like preschool in Holland. And then they switched to an international school in Holland. And then, Tokyo was an international school.
Yeah, you have
and
to.
Then the US was just, an American school. I really, really wanted them to continue with the IB program in the States. But, with the research, I realized that the IB in the States was very different to the IB in the international schools that the kids had been to. So we just decided to go full on US system. And that was a massive change for the kids.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
We could have a whole podcast on that. Maybe we'll have you back, because that's a fraught decision. Local school or private school is a fraught decision always, as long as you're lucky enough to be able to afford the school if you're not with the company. But then you told me something when we spoke earlier that I really wanted to bring out as a last thing, and then I want to talk about your book. Never tell your kids something. Do you remember what you said? Never tell your kids the world, they can go anywhere in the world, or the world is their oyster.
Yeah. Oh my God, never tell your kids the world is their oyster. Oh my gosh. So right now, I have 3 kids. So one of them is living with us, a 23-year-old. He's just graduated from college and he's looking for a job. The other 3 are spread all over the world. I have one in Portland, Oregon. He ended up going to State University, and he did mechanical engineering. He's working for Intel. So he stayed there. Then my number 2, she went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo in California and is now working at Disney, and she's living in San Diego. And my 3rd one is the one that's here in Madrid with us. And my number 4 is the one who I told the world is your oyster when she was applying for colleges, and she ended up applying to colleges in Australia.
So far away.
So she's in Sydney, and she's studying marine science, and she is absolutely loving it. Definitely the place for her. I was absolutely devastated when I heard that that's where she wanted to go. And I said to her, as long as it makes sense, because when she asked me, she goes, "Mummy, where can I apply to?" And in my head, it was like, okay, she's probably going to apply to somewhere in the States because we just moved from the States. This is when we were living in Modena after the States. Or she'll apply somewhere in Europe. And I said, "Darling, the world is your oyster." And then she comes back with 5 different places in Australia. But I said, as long as it makes sense, darling.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it did make sense. She wanted to do marine science, and she's at the University of Sydney right now. She's about to start her 3rd year, and currently she is at the Great Barrier Reef doing a research project on the octopi that survive they have a symbiotic relationship with the coral reef. So it's fascinating stuff, amazing stuff.
Well done. Yeah. It sounds like your kids you don't get to see them every day, but they're doing amazingly with this. So I think your thesis paid off. And how do you stay connected? How do you stay connected now that they're adults with this little family nest?
Yeah, so we basically see each other twice a year, Christmas time and summertime. I'm super, super, super grateful and happy that they still want to come and see us twice a year. They're still spending their time and money, their precious holiday time, coming to visit their parents. So yeah, we do that. We just had Christmas time. They all came to Modena, and we spent time in Modena. It was amazing. And then this summer, we'll probably meet up in the south of Italy, where we have a home there, summer home there. Yeah. And of course, with FaceTime. FaceTime is amazing. Thank God for FaceTime.
Yeah, when you give your kids the world, they take it, luckily, it sounds like to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Paolo and I knew that the kids were not going to be around the corner. We knew that. But yeah, Australia was a hard one to swallow. But I've actually just come back from visiting her, and she was so excited for me to come. I spent 3 weeks there with her because she just wanted to show me just how much she loved it and why she loved it. And yeah, I completely understand, completely get it now. So yeah.
Every time my mom comes, she goes, "I can see why you live here." And she's still so mad that I moved, but she's like, "But you're happy here, so I'm happy." And then she's still, it's been 8 years. She's not okay with it, but I get it, because now I look at my kids and the years we spend together are so precious. Like when I see my kids, they're now 13, almost 12 and 10. And I'm like, this little nest is going to get a lot bigger. And so enjoying those years when they're under my roof is basically my job.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about your book. Tell me, with the time we have left, I want you to tell me all about it. Like why you decided to write it, because I'm so inspired by your foresight, your life story, everything about it. So tell me about the book.
So I have been writing a blog for probably about 6 years now. The blog is called wonderingidentity.com. And, the blog is basically little snippets of my life, stories of my childhood, little moments in time of what happened when I was younger. And, I started getting quite a big following, and a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, it's super interesting. You should definitely write a book." I had absolutely no plan of writing a book. But, with all these people constantly saying, "You need to do it, this would be great." So when we moved to Modena, which was 3 years ago, after the US, I decided to play around with it. And yeah, the book is actually, it's a memoir, and it's about a woman searching for the true meaning of home. I actually talk about that, obviously, but I talk about the relationships and the differences between how my parents did it and how I'm doing it, and the reasons why. The backstory is all about, my childhood and the places that I've lived in when I was a child. So people get that sort of adventure outlook, we're living in the Ivory Coast and in Hong Kong and in Zambia and things like that. But really, the most important thing is it's a woman's search for resonance, for that deep connection, belonging, meaning, finding places and people and experiences that truly resonate with my soul. So that's what it's about.
And we've talked a little bit about this, but how do you describe home now?
Home is a feeling. It's not a place, but it's a feeling. It's really something that's inside of you. I actually have a quote here from a writer called Pico Aya. I don't know whether you know him, but he's amazing. He has this amazing TED talk. Look him up. It's about home. And his quote is, "Home has less to do with a piece of soil than a piece of soul." So that to me is what home is.
Yeah. And do you think that's something you've honed with your life experience more than maybe others, is identifying that feeling?
Yeah, because I mean, okay, the dreaded question wherever I go, and the first person I meet is, "Where are you from?" It's like, oh
Do
my
you make the
God.
list? Do you lie? Do you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The original title of my book, actually, Funny Feeling, was "You're Not From London," because I used to lie about where I was from. I used to always say that I was from London, just to sort of, just stop the conversation. And one particular time, this is actually in my book, one time my daughter was there. She was about 7 at the time. And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm from London." She just looked at me, she said, "Mummy, you're not from London." This is in front of the person. And I'm like, oh my God, shush, shush. You know how it's,
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed. So yeah, from that moment on, I decided, you know what, I really need to figure out what I need to say. I just say, it's a bit long-winded and complicated, but I'm a little bit from all over the place. I have a British passport, but I wasn't born there and I didn't grow up there. That's pretty much it. And then if people want to know more, they'll ask more.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so fraught. And it gets more fraught the more countries you go to. That question. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But I think actually writing this book has really made me feel okay with it. It's sitting a lot better with me now, because it's always been, okay, where am I from? What's my identity? Well, my identity is lots of things, lots of places, lots of people. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
this
that's beautiful.
amalgamation of so much. It's not just one thing.
Yeah. And it really shapes who you are. So you are that. So when people say, "Where are you from?" you're telling the truth, just because it's more than one. It's who you
Yeah.
are. There's
Yeah.
nothing to be done about it, luckily.
Yeah, and of course we know that, it depends on who's asking the question. If it's a fellow global nomad, then of course I can be completely and utterly honest. But if it's someone who has lived in one place, like for example, my experience when I was living in Portland, it was very difficult for a lot of them to wrap their heads around
Yeah.
who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. I want to ask you one final question, if you have another second. So we spoke before, and I wanted to bring this to this conversation. Living as you have as a global nomad, at least in my relationship, in our family and the circles I'm in, we're always talking about, are we going to do this for the rest of our lives? Are we going to move around? Are we going to live outside of our own country? Are we going to go back? Or what is our plan in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? We call it like our final place or our family place. How have you conceptualized that problem? I know you said you have a summer house somewhere that your family comes to. Tell us that about your plans that way, or how you're thinking about that.
So, okay, I mentioned earlier on that, Paulo has this, very, very strong sense of identity in terms of, where he's from and everything. So, and that's what attracted me to him, all those years ago, 29 years ago. So, the fact that I'd never had that, and he was, such a strong Southern Italian man and such strong, deeply set roots. We would go back to Italy a lot because that's what he wanted, that's what he needed. And in the 29 years that we've been together, we've just sort of, that this has been like the most I've been anywhere, returning back, going back to Italy.
Yeah.
So when the kids were growing up, I could feel and I could tell that the kids were feeling a little bit unsettled and unrooted and unstable. And that's when we decided to buy a place down in the south of Italy, which is where he's from, and our own place, just to call home, away from home. And we would return. We still do every year. We go back to that place. So that place has been in our life for quite a long time now, for about 15 years. And it's the one constant that has continued, that has been there for 15 years. So I have that. But at the same time, I think to myself, oh my goodness, there's no way that I can be in one place for the rest of my life. There's no way. So why do I have to actually decide? So we're kind of just going with the flow and just seeing what happens. We haven't made any decisions, and yeah, we'll see what happens, as I said.
You'll live your life as you've lived it. And it sounds like you'll have 4 wonderful places to visit for your kids.
Exactly. So if we do end up, if my husband, because I think he'll be the one that will end up saying, I think we need to kind of just settle or whatever, and I'll just go with the flow like I always have done with him. It's going to be easier for me to be able to do that because I have all these wonderful places to go and see my kids. My kids are all over the world. We'll be able to travel. They'll be able to come to us. So it's not like, okay, I'm back there and that's it. No.
Yeah. Yeah. We always talk about, we wish our parents would come, like, have like visa, like, you don't have a house, you just travel with us for 3 months, and then my sister with 3 months, and my brother with 3 months, and just go around and be with us. And so sometimes my partner and I talk about that, like, maybe we don't need to have a home when the kids go. We just spend 3 months, and then 3 months alone, and then 3 months, we have 3 kids.
That's exactly what we're going to be doing. So we are going to be going around the world and hanging out with the kids. I mean, this last 3 weeks with Sophia, my youngest, was amazing because we were just hanging out. And my parents did the same.
They did.
When my children were younger, my parents would come and they'd spend 2 months with us in Tokyo, 2 months with us in the US, the same in Holland. Yeah. So that's what we would like to do. That's if they want us.
Yeah, I mean, that is predicated on this very strong relationship, which I think you've done you've made a path to have that be very, very possible. So I can't wait to read your book. Yeah. I mean, there's still more life to be lived, but thank you for sharing this snapshot of your life right now and how mindful you've been about your life and how respectful you have been about your past too. I think a lot of times it's easy to say, my parents did it this way and I don't want it, in anger, but with respect and reverence, you have done it differently. And I think it resonates very strongly with me. So thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much, Mikkel.
Yeah, I cannot wait to read your book. Yeah, I cannot wait to read your book and share it with others. And tell everyone where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, _wandering_identity_. And please look on my website, which is wanderingidentity.com.
Right, and we'll put that in the box below as well.
Yeah, wonderful. All right.
Thank you for this conversation.
So much, Mikkel. This is great. Thank you. I feel like we can chat and chat and chat forever.
I'll be calling you again. Like you're now one of the wisest women I know. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later.